You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box. We're happy that you're here. We are here to discuss your mental health questions. So any questions you have, write in. It is how we do the show. It's how we get the questions. It's where we get our content. So write in and let us know your mental health questions. We are here to answer them. Today I have with me Mary Lamas. Mary, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me again, Linz.
So happy that you're here because this topic is one that we hear a lot of buzzwords about. Mm-hmm. It's boundaries. Boundaries, I feel like people, I hear them say, oh, my so-and-so, my aunt, my uncle, my brother went to therapy and now they're all boundaried. Like it's a terrible thing, right? Or they're like, have all these boundaries.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about them. The listener question is pretty basic. It is, how do I know if my boundaries are too rigid or just healthy?
Love it.
Love it. Super basic, but I think it's a question a lot of people have. Yeah. And boundaries are not easy. Mm-mm. They're not easy for anyone. Mm-mm. We often weren't taught them and we are not good at them. Yeah. Any other reasons why you think boundaries are hard?
Yeah, well, boundaries are hard because they're in a gray scale, right? And they're one of those really obnoxious things that when therapists talk, we're like, well, it depends on what are your values? And we use all those, obnoxious therapy words. But truly, it is an internal process. And I think people have a hard time when they have to trust their gut always. And there are a lot of things thrown around right now, like narcissism and toxicity and things like that are valid things, but are maybe getting tossed around a lot. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of information out there. You get all the TikTok reels and things like that are saying when someone does this, we cut them off, right? But
cancel culture.
Live
and well.
Yeah. Yep. And there have been times when I've had to cut people out, right? Mm-hmm. But I think we have, the pendulum has kind of swung over to cancel culture a lot. And there are ways of speaking up and having an understanding with people and trying that step before you get to kind of one extreme or the other.
Okay. Yeah. I like that idea that there's a lot of gray with mm-hmm. boundaries. Like it's not one way or the other, mm-hmm. but there's some steps to take. I love that you talked about values to begin with. Mm-hmm. I feel like that is such an important thing to start talking about is what are your values? In fact, with my class that I teach at the university, I talk to them a lot about that. Like work with clients around their values mm-hmm. because when we understand what our values are, what matters to us, then we can say, this is where your boundary might be, right? Or they're deciding what their boundary is based on their values, right?
Yeah.
Any other reason why there's some, like why, first of all, why values are important mm-hmm. with boundaries?
Yeah, so values are really interesting because we grow up in a family, in a community, sometimes in a faith setting, all these different things that kind of have different rules, and we have different parts of us that can be a little bit different. As we grow up, part of the normal process of growing up is figuring out what's my value system. And the reason they're really important with boundaries is that it's different for every person. What is important to me is probably not, my top 3 values are not your top 3 values, and so we're going to feel comfortable differently with those. And when you're trying to live by somebody else's values, that's when things go south, when they get really uncomfortable. And what you're actually doing, and you can ask questions about values without tossing them out, right? Mm-hmm. Not like we're going to toss everything out and start over or whatever, but maybe this is a little more important to me than it was growing up or in my community or something like that. And that happens very often. And being able to have space within yourself to know that about you, I find it to be so helpful when I start spinning with anxiety or indecisiveness or things like that, framing things in a way that...
You never do that.
Ever,
come on.
Never. I know everything.
That's right.
Always.
Never have a problem with that.
So when I'm having trouble with decisiveness, really orienting myself, I go back to the question of what are my top 3 values? And it's actually something I do with most of my clients. It's rare that I don't do this with a client. Pretty quickly off the bat is, what are you about? And some clients know right away. Most clients, and myself included, it was a little bit excruciating, like
100%.
going from 100 values down to 25, down to 10. And I remember being like, I'm done. I can't go from 10 to 3. I can't. But I did, and it took a lot of introspection, and it's really important. So now when I have a decision to make, I go, is this applicable to my values? Is this choice applicable? Is this choice applicable? And kind of how important is that? And it's a really good baseline to start with, right? It's a really good compass that doesn't put me so at odds, right? Because I've made this decision, and values can change. They tend to stay the same-ish. But my values have stayed pretty much the same. And so when I say, well, is this genuine? And because that's one of my top 3, then I can go, it's not. Okay, now I know what to do, and I can feel more confident about it because I know what I'm about, instead of just like, well, who am I at church? Who am I at home? Who am I at work? That kind of a thing.
But just saying, this is who I am. This is what matters to me. And then based on what matters to me, then I can create boundaries around that. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Okay.
And that's really important, because when we aren't living in our values, we are trying to convince ourselves of something that isn't true.
Yes.
And you can't do it. Your feelings can be suppressed, but they can't go away. They don't go away. And we can choose what we spend time with or not, but they pop back up later in ways that are really not fun.
I always say that. They just come out sideways.
Yeah.
They come out sideways later on, but they'll come out.
Yes.
And you have to recognize that. It's the incongruency. This is what I'm doing or what I'm saying, but this is not really what I believe or what feels right to me. And so there's this incongruency of like, I feel yucky in my own decisions, in my own self.
Yep.
Yeah. So really good. Okay, so let's talk about, back to this question, how do we know if boundaries are too rigid?
Oh man, I love this question. So I like to think of boundaries, and I use this in therapy a lot. When you build a skyscraper, it's this amazing, awesome structure, and close to the bottom, things are pretty tight. And then one of the things that you have to factor in for those top levels is sway, right? Being able to be flexible with the environment, okay? And that ultimately is the question that we have in ourselves is this so close to me that I don't have a lot of wiggle room on it? Or is this something that I can be flexible with, right? And that's different for everybody in their values. So I will never, or almost never, with that genuineness, me showing up as me is really important. Mm-hmm. So I will say no to things that would ask me to show up differently. But if it's at odds with one of my other values, important values, then you got to have some wiggle room.
Okay, give me an example.
An example.
Let's hear
it. So I loved that this was a boundaries question because I am married to someone from another culture. I grew up in Utah, Caucasian family. Utah is very white. I don't know if people know that, but
public service announcement.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
PSA, if you haven't been to Utah. Yeah. So, and I married a man who grew up in the United States, but is like a first generation citizen, and he's from Peru. And I didn't have a lot of contact with a lot of Latino culture. And I remember this being like strange new world when we were dating and engaged, and there were new meanings to what I was doing, and I really had to think about polite versus genuine, right? For me. A funny example is that I am a really weird person that hates shrimp more than any other food, right?
Really?
I know. Nobody...
What a bummer.
Yeah. 1 out of 5 or so people out there are like, yes, there is another person out there, but we're few, right?
Yeah.
And so
but you hate shrimp. I'm here for it.
So going to meet my mother-in-law and her side of the family, all I knew was that it was really not okay to not eat food that you were offered. And that's fine. I'm pretty adventurous across the board, except with shrimp. And we had dinner plans, and we were just making a quick stop and at a family member's house for just to give a little kid a birthday present. They weren't expecting us, and the kid had requested fettuccine shrimp Alfredo.
Of course,
right?
he did.
It was like this special. So it was funny because in my culture, it's, oh, do you want to stay for dinner is polite, and oh no, thank you, we have plans is polite. But in that culture, it was, if it's offered, it's accepted, despite the fact that there's not enough food for everybody or something like that. So I had this moment of, we sat down to eat, and I was like, I don't think I can be an adult about this, right? Like eating this.
It's not going to go well.
It's not going to go well. And so I was getting more and more like upset watching this plate come around, because it was a special dinner for their family, and I didn't want to meet this extended family and put a bad impression on them. I didn't want to be rude. So I tried to just like pass it on, and the whole table stopped. It was like the record scratched.
Oh, no.
Mary, what's going on? Are you okay? What's going on? What's wrong with the food? And then they're thinking it's them, right? And so I lied, and I said, I'm allergic, right?
To shrimp.
Because in that moment, I had different values at odds. Like the genuineness, that a lot of that is honesty, right? I don't like lying. I don't like mincing words so much. But at the same time, I'm also really about family and building connection with family and friends. And those two were at odds. And so sometimes in that moment, I kind of had to choose.
Had to make a choice.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I did, and I felt a little guilty about it. I did confess like 15 years later, but but sometimes they're at odds, and we have to have kind of a hierarchy, if you will. But most of the time, boundaries don't have to be ultimatums. Boundaries are loving. They are considerate, they're clear. They don't leave anybody guessing. They don't leave anybody, hopefully, they don't leave anybody guessing or trying to decipher or wondering what they did wrong or something like that, because they're clear. That's one of the really important things. It's not, you're going to act like I want you to act or we're done. Yeah. Right? That's not a boundary, that's a demand, right? And there are demands and there are requests and things like that. But a boundary is a loving connection to someone where it's like, when this happens, I don't feel, and you can just say, in my values, sometimes it's safe, sometimes it's appreciated, sometimes, respected, thinking about my own boundaries that have been hard to put up with people. That's usually along the lines of where we're at. Yeah. But if in our friendship, if there's something that I feel the need to make a boundary with, if I say, hey, you know what, this isn't comfortable, and I wonder if we could change it, then it gives conversation space, because we're in a relationship and care about each other. And I care about your feelings, and I know you care about my feelings. What gets really uncomfortable is when you're trying to have a relationship with somebody who doesn't care about your feelings. Yeah. And you don't know what to do with it, right?
That's a time when you really need to evaluate that relationship, right?
Yes.
I mean, if that's the case, then that's even some deeper work that you have to do, right?
Yeah, deeper work, and a lot of times that's just acceptance of what is and what isn't.
Yeah, it's true. Acceptance of reality. This is what it is. I think another important thing to discuss is the fact that I hear a lot of clients say, I'm going to put up a boundary for him. So he's not, I don't feel comfortable when he does this. And I will have to reel them back and say, wait a minute, a boundary is about you. You can't put boundaries for other people. It's literally your line in the sand saying this is what does and doesn't work, I will and won't do, and it's about you. It's not, we can't put boundaries for other people.
Right.
And I think that's sometimes hard because
Very.
we want to do that because that's like, oh, if I can control them, oh, that feels like safety. Ooh, okay, I'm going to do that, right? Yeah. But really getting clear, like, this is about us. This is not about the other person. And I do think sometimes boundaries also can be spoken, like, this is my boundary. And I also think they don't have to be spoken, right? Like saying, you know what, this is what I know for me, and I know this is what works for me and what doesn't. And so I make a choice accordingly. I don't have to say, hey, Mary, you've just crossed a boundary and I'm not okay with it, right? But just saying, you know what, this is, I know what it's like for me. And so I make choices accordingly.
Right.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yes. And I will say, you know, we're both therapists, so we would talk, but there are certainly people that often we have to make boundaries with people that you can't talk to about the thing because it's too unsafe, right? And that's why we're putting a boundary in the first place.
Right.
So you can have these boundaries. The real trick is to put a boundary where, you know, I heard someone say the other day, one of our coworkers say, two phrases that I use a lot. No one's coming to help you or to save you, and how are you, and you can only control yourself, right? And that is one of the hardest things when you're dealing with boundaries and conflict and things like that, is you're like, well, if this other person would just make this little change and accept this boundary and stop fighting it, and just like, if we could just calm down a little bit there, then all of this could be, you know, roses. But
doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. We have no control over other people. So boundaries are for ourselves so that we know what we're going to do in that situation.
Even if it is shrimp.
Yeah, even if it's shrimp.
Even if it's shrimp and you're like, I gotta lie about this. Your heart might have been allergic to it. Maybe you weren't physically allergic to it, but maybe it was your heart. I don't know. There's that. So how do we communicate boundaries in ways that strengthen relationship and don't create distance?
Boy, that's kind of a hard one, because sometimes boundaries require distance, right? I'm a firm believer in people show you how they feel about you by how they treat you. Very often when you're talking about...
Okay, can we just wait a minute?
Yeah.
I think that was so good. People show you how they feel about you by the way they treat you. Period.
Yeah,
like,
period.
Just observe the way they treat you and you'll know how they feel about you. That's sometimes a hard pill to swallow, but a lot of good information.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is, you know, so if someone can love you a lot, but how they feel about you is that you need to be controlled, and you're not okay with that control or whatever that may be in your life, but they are okay with controlling you and they're showing you that repeatedly. Really, the problem comes a lot of the time. There are a lot of times in our lives when we have to examine a relationship with somebody that we love or feel beholden to or responsible for or something like that, and we have like that honesty of, this person is actually choosing to treat me this way, and that's okay with them. Right. That is hard.
That's so hard. Yeah. Oh, that's painful.
Very
because
painful.
we want people to love us, right? We're a lot of us are people pleasers, and we're recovering people pleasers,
right.
but we want to be loved. I mean, that's a big part of us existing in this world, is connecting with other people and having relationships. So knowing, oh, actually they don't treat me well. That is a really hard pill to swallow.
So hard. And it really hurts, because you're trying to see the good in them and the love in the relationship. And you can see that oftentimes, like, well, they lashed out in this way because they're feeling out of control or whatever that may be. But that doesn't mean that I have to lower my values to accommodate theirs, right? It might require some more distance. It might require some brainstorming. It might require time, and it's probably going to be hard, but I've never had somebody put up a boundary that they came up with from their values and from their heart and from thinking it over and regret that they built that boundary because it is true to them and they're not living in somebody else's lens.
Yes.
Right? And that's hugely important. And
huge.
Yeah.
But also recognizing it's not easy.
Yeah.
Like that they didn't regret it, but it doesn't mean that it's a cakewalk. It still is hard, right? Because we're saying, okay, this is what works for me, what doesn't. And that we don't get to manage how other people feel about that. Right? We don't get to control that.
Yeah.
It's hard.
So I want to talk about a little bit about rigid boundaries. How we know that they're too rigid is that there is so much fear behind rigidity, right? If this moves, then what? What does it mean about me? What am I afraid of? Why am I so rigid on this? So if in my family it is not allowed for the kids not to show up for dinner at, I don't even know why I'm doing this because this is not like how we run our house, but right? Like,
all good.
We don't have dinner at 6, but if there's dinner at 6 and they are not allowed to not be at dinner at 6, then
you're never eating dinner, because I'm like, that's a big one. That would be wild.
Right?
But okay, I'm here for it. Yeah.
But then my kids really have to conform to my values, and they might not jive with that. There's no space for the relationship. There's no space for understanding. There's no space for, and it's not necessarily even negotiation. It's just understanding. Like, plenty of times kids come to their parents and go, I do not like this rule, this boundary that you have. And I consider that as a parent. And then most of the time, because I've considered boundaries, most of the time I come back and say, man, I can see that feels that way. I can appreciate that. I'm really sorry. But that's what keeps us safe or connected or whatever that may be. And we can disagree on the boundary, but I'm still going to hold my boundary.
So what I'm hearing, and I think it's different with kids, because kids are really willing to push you on boundaries and question boundaries. But if I'm your friend, I might not feel as comfortable saying, you know what, I don't like that. That doesn't work for me. And it might just create distance in the relationship versus connection. What do you do about that?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing, Lindsay, because I've been on here before and said that I have ADHD.
Yeah.
And ADHD is very black and white thinking. It is, and I don't pick up on a lot of the gray area of social situations, and it's been problematic across the years. So it's hard because with my personality, I so appreciate an upfront, loving conversation, right? And if I would much rather someone approach me and say, can we talk about this? And we can disagree, but can we talk about it than anything else? But I understand having a strong personality. I have a lot of people in my life who don't, and they're the yin to the yang, and they don't like to speak up, and it's scary to do so. And I think that we're back to, you teach people teach you how they feel about you by how they treat you. And you have that also. You can teach people how you need to be treated.
Yes.
Just by doing things different. So if I have, for example, a friend who's really anxious and really organized and on top of things, I get this a lot because I'm not organized, so I'm friends with people who are, right? So
you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
I hear you. Yep.
So if I have someone that is a rapid fire texter, right, and if they don't hear back from me in 5 minutes, it's awful, right? That's not going to work because I get really overwhelmed with too much communication at once and needing to answer this and this and this and this and this. And so I try to kind of off the bat say, you know what, if you need me right now, like, can you say that, or like call me or something? And I offer a different way of doing it because I'm not going to be able to text you back right away.
I actually love that, Mary, because like when I will hear somebody's voicemail and they'll say, hey, if you want a quicker response, text me. I don't listen to my voicemail. I actually love that. I heard my brother's the other day, and he said, my wife thinks that's so rude. And I was like, no. It's fantastic, because I'm not going to leave you a voicemail ever. But I will text you. And it's a kind way of saying, like, it's giving people information. It's just saying, this is what I will and won't do. And it's not... There's nothing to be offended about. It's just, it is what it is. You're not going to be a rapid fire texter. Okay, well, now we know it's not personal.
Right.
That makes a big difference when we know it's not personal, but this is just who you are. Yeah, I like that.
But I do like the clarity. And then when in my life I have felt some distance, like a new boundary coming up in a relationship that they've put in place, and we haven't really talked about it. Sometimes, unfortunately for them, because they don't like conflict or addressing things, I ask, like, it seems like you need something here. Can you help me understand what it is? And then I thank them always for telling me, whether I agree or not, because it's hard to share our boundaries with people. And, you know, the ultimate relationship that we haven't brought up yet necessarily is the mother-in-law relationship, right? Where, man, that's hard to navigate that, because you're trying to build something new and you have different communication patterns, and everybody thinks that they're on the same page, and you know, different cultures and different ideas of what Christmas should be and things like that. And really, those situations need flexibility for everybody to feel safe or peaceful or whatever that is. And more understanding really can help take the venom out of situations.
For sure. And you know what I keep thinking though too, you have to have a lot of courage to do this.
So much. Yeah.
So much courage. Like if I am having a hard time with my mother-in-law and saying, gosh, this is how we do Christmas, like, I got to have that conversation instead of just go, she's lame. And I hate the way she does it. Like, I have to step into my own courage and my own understanding, and then sit in some curiosity with what her experience is too. I mean, when I hear that, I think sometimes boundaries get a bad rap because it's like, no, I'm cutting you out. Nope, this is what it is and it's not here. But I think the willingness to actually engage with people and say, this is what my experience is, what is yours? And the willingness to actually be able to sit in that is a skill that is not easy.
Correct. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up that word courage, because it is very intertwined with a lot of therapy, right? Boundaries being almost step one. And, you know, we love Brene Brown, and she has this beautiful, if you have a minute to go listen to her TED Talk about how courage always requires vulnerability. And that's true. There is no level, if our listeners have one that they can think of that's an act of courage that doesn't require vulnerability, I want to hear about it, because I have yet to come across this.
Absolutely.
But it's vulnerable, but also the moments of deepest connection and most important connection that are so important to building a relationship are vulnerable.
So true.
Vulnerability invites, and it understands, and it is curious. And those are all good things. Excuse me. So bringing up a boundary is a loving thing, because it's vulnerable and it takes courage, and it doesn't always go the way we want it to. But I mean, I've had plenty of boundaries in my life, and have seen in others' lives, like the out of the box thinking that comes when you can try to understand each other and be vulnerable with each other is a lot. You know?
It is. It's actually such a gift when you allow yourself to share your heart with somebody else. It gives them permission to do the same.
Yeah.
It gives them. You say, you know what? You matter enough to me that I want to share my heart with you, and that I want to hear what's going on with you as well. And again, I think that is something that's a skill that we are probably not great at, and we could get a lot better at, you know. I think in relationships, all of us, right? All of us. I think in relationships, sometimes we just go, you know what, I'm just going to avoid that because it's actually not comfortable. But what do? We avoid the vulnerability, and we avoid connection, right? John and Julie Gottman, who are the researchers behind like the couples therapy, like I feel like they're, the Gottman
gurus.
method, they're the gurus. you know, they talk a lot about that, and they say it's not about the disconnect. They can tell when people are going to make it in relationship. And what is it? It's actually the repair.
Yeah.
It's actually that coming back together and saying, help me to understand. And I want to see your part in it. And I would also like you to see mine. The repair that we do is actually where connection lies. And sometimes we're too afraid to even have those difficult connections or those conversations. So we never actually get to the repair. And so we just kind of live these lives of like side by side. We're passing like ships in the night and doing a thing, but there's like a lack of connection, and it really requires that vulnerability.
And that lack of connection robs us of what we really want in relationships, right?
Yes.
So I can get upset and cut off this person from our lives, but then I really am losing touch with all of the goodness in there. And you know, every now and again that's appropriate, but it's not just me, it's my family, it's my friends, it's whatever. And you really are robbing yourself when you're not having the courage to have those conversations, those vulnerable conversations that can deepen the relationship. If you're willing to just kind of avoid it and drift away, that's kind of like a really passive way of saying, I don't care enough about this to really like confront it, which sounds really harsh, but we've all done that. I want to be clear that we've all done I just can't look at this. But you could have a conversation about it and it gets better, or you can have a conversation about it and it doesn't get better, and then you know.
Yep.
And
it's
you
information.
have more peace about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's information.
So when people can't meet you on a boundary, that can feel really hard and really sad. And there's a grieving in that. But it also helps me feel more peaceful about, well, I've tried, I've done my part, I've really invited connection, I've been vulnerable, and they still, it's more about winning, or it's more about getting what I want, or whatever that may be, than it is about our relationship.
Absolutely.
So then I can act accordingly.
Yeah.
And I can just put a little more distance in between. And
you have a boundary.
Yes, I have
there
a boundary.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
Good. I love that. Is there anything, Mary, that you feel like is really important that we haven't talked about?
Yeah. I had it.
Until I asked, right? That's usually what happens.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about like rigid boundaries, but I really do want to talk about boundaries that are really thin or change a lot, right? That's also an unhealthy boundary, and it's very common in a lot of cultures that are collaborative cultures or striving to be better cultures, that the answer seems to be boundaries are bad and you are mean if you put a boundary in place. That is often the message that comes. However, we know already, right, that we can suppress our feelings, we can't eliminate them. And so really coming around to that and being honest about, so all of you people, my professor called this helium hands. You know, she said in our field, somebody asks for volunteers and it's like, we can't help it, our helium hands go up and volunteer. And that's really, really apt. And a lot of people do that. There needs to be someone, and so I have to help, but it's not helpful. It breeds resentment. If you are maxed out and you say yes, then if you don't get what you're looking for out of that, or if something else inevitably falls off because you're doing this instead, that's not healthy either. And it is people pleasing. It's not living in your values. So please make sure that you listen to yourself and listen to discomfort is okay. Challenging ourselves and growing, that's okay. But saying yes to everything is not a healthy boundary for yourself. Yeah.
Amen. I love that. Like, remember those helium hands, they only should be raised when you actually really feel that it's something you want to do. You know, I think sometimes we're duty bound. That's the right thing to do. But the reality is, is my heart there? Do I really want to do that? And saying yes all the time is also not honoring ourselves.
Right. And asking, how is this going to affect my life? Like, I used to love signing up to bring things or host things. And my husband actually had to set a really firm boundary with me. Please don't do this anymore, because it makes you really upset and brings that into our home.
Yep.
And then you're upset with us so that you can host.
Yeah, he's like, this is not fair. We're not doing this anymore. No, thank you.
And that was hard to accept, but right. So bring your balloon weight when you have a meeting.
I love that.
For those
balloon weight is always helpful. Yes. And I think it's such a good reminder, Mary, and I really appreciate you being here, is, boundaries aren't about keeping others out.
No.
They're about keeping yourself centered. They're about honoring you and the relationship. And again, it's such an important reminder that where I end and where another person begins, and really getting clear about that. And it actually is what brings about more meaningful, deeper, more connected relationships. So I love that reminder. Thank you so much for being here and discussing. I love the discussion. I think it's one that is so useful for everybody. Boundaries are not easy, and they're going to continue to be hard because we're learning how to do them, right? We often, again, weren't taught them, and we're learning as we go, because they change and they evolve, and we evolve, and relationships evolve. So again, thank you so much for your insights, and thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, please share this with somebody that you love. I know this can be beneficial. This information is useful for so many. And again, thank you for listening and tuning in. And until next time, take care.